This is Mohan Nair of the Department of English, the University of Hyderabad, and here we will be continuing our exploration of post-human ethics with particular reference to post-human vulnerability and literary cultural studies. In the earlier weeks, you might remember our discussion of biocapitalism in contemporary literature, and this is something you might want to revisit when you look at this particular module, because in the lesson on biocapitalism, we noted the fact that biological matter is now part of the global capital network, and that human tissue, animal tissue, plant tissue, all of these have been rendered into materials for global financial and other transactions. And biocapitalism has also meant that the value of life, which we can define as animal or plant, has been enmeshed with questions of profit and questions of technology, as in whether we can make use of them in certain ways, whether the fetus has a certain value, whether the adult blood or stem cell tissues have a different value. These are questions that remain within biocapitalist narratives and the critique of biocapitalism by people like Kaushik Sundararajan and others. So I would recommend that you go and take a quick look at the lesson on biocapitalism and biocapitalism in contemporary literature. We are interested in ethics towards posthumans, right? As you might recall from the previous lesson. And we're also interested in how the posthuman subject is being defined and whether there is something called posthuman subjectivity. And this has raised, as you might recall from our previous class, very serious questions about what is a posthuman subject? Is there an ethics towards the posthuman subject? What is the kind of right regime? What is the kind of ethical, philosophical position towards the posthuman subject? These have been, like I said, very important considerations and concerns. I also cautioned you that there are no easy answers for these questions. The debate is still on. It involves multiple angles, as you can perhaps understand. There are theologians involved, there are literary studies scholars involved, there are philosophers involved, there are of course legal and medical scholars involved in trying to understand and define what we mean by the posthuman subject. And just to recap quickly, these are being defined as allo persons, allo humans. They are also being defined as ersatz moral persons. And you will recall in the last class we spoke about the fact that if they're designed to do things for humans, are we making them slaves? Because that is what their purpose is, and it's not a question of acting against their will or their agency, because that is their shall we go to a more spiritualized theological term? That's what they're preordained to do. Or are we creating a new species, a new race of slaves? Big questions, no real answers. And therefore, proceeding from these questions is the thornier issue of whether there is something called posthuman vulnerability. Vulnerability, as we know, is mediated for us through various modes. Literary cultural texts are useful to understand vulnerability because they show us individual or collective bodies being rendered open to injury. They offer very specific, very detailed accounts of systemic or intrinsic contexts in which the posthuman body might be injured. And you might want to spend a minute going back to the story of Hitchbot, which we looked at last time. The Hitchbot which traversed Europe, Canada, was treated very well by several people who took the bot to a wedding, to a comics convention, and then somebody ripped its head off and mangled it and left it by the roadside. Like I said, a tragic technological story. The literary cultural texts also develop a language in which we can talk about vulnerable people, vulnerable groups, and also vulnerable life forms, which include now the Robo sapiens. Literary cultural text shows how individuals and groups might actually respond or resist conditions of vulnerability. They might offer alternatives to the current scenario where a new world order might be created, where the robots have more rights. Literary fiction such as Kazuo Ishigiro's Never Let Me Go and Clara and the Sun are at the forefront of these debates. And they ask the following questions. And please revisit Michael Labossiere and the arguments rehearsed from Michael Labossiere in the previous lessons. If an artificial being undertakes to perform all the tasks of a human, does it deserve a moral obligation to recognize it as an ersatz moral person? Is it ethical to create vulnerable human beings whose primary design, purpose, and ambition is to serve the humans? Would the creation of such beings be a reiteration of a very old colonial structure, the slave system? Finally, are the artificial beings persons? And if so, do they have rights? Right? Let's look at the novels. Ruth, one of the clones in Never Let Me Go, Kazuo Ishigiro's novel, says, I was pretty much ready when I became a donor. It felt right. After all, it's what we are supposed to be doing, isn't it? I urge you very strongly to look at the language in which Ishiguro writes this. Remember, Ishiguro is science fiction without the science. Very minimalistic, very Spartan kind of prose. But look at the power of the imagination and the power of the message he is coding into his novels. The clone says, I was ready to donate my organs. And if you know your novel, the clones are created and are allowed to grow up in very wonderful surroundings with one purpose to their life. When they reach a certain age, they start donating their internal organs, their vital organs, to human beings who have to be kept alive. Now, this process is not with the approval of the clones, although it's called donation and they're called donors. The clones are manufactured for the exclusive purpose of donating their vital organs. And after the fourth donation, they invariably die. And Ruth says in the novel, it felt right. It felt right. Wasn't that what we are supposed to do? Now, you might remember the detailed explication we made about robo rights, that if that is what the robo is supposed to do, if serving the humans is what the robo has been designed to do, then should we not allow it to fulfill its rights? Should we not let it continue with its capacities, buildings, aspirational fulfillments, and whatnot? Why do we think that at that point we say, no, we can't allow that? So that's what Ruth says. It felt right. Isn't that what we are supposed to do? Now, this is a good question. Isn't that what we are supposed to do? In all these novels, their bodies are vulnerable, the clones are vulnerable, principally because they have no control or agency over their bodies. They are medically treated very carefully, very considerately, very correctly. They are allowed to have a good life, but they have no independence. So they have no control over things like reproduction and sex. They have no control over what they will do with their lives. They also have no control over whether they want to donate their organs or not. So the clones are vulnerable post-human beings because of this lack of agency and the loss of control, that they do not determine the course of their lives. So the questions Ishiguro raises are as follows. Can we and should we create slave bodies whose purpose is to serve humanity? Is it ethical to create an order of beings, such as clones here, to serve our human needs? Are clones persons? If so, do they merit human rights? No clear answers to any of these. Please understand that, this is something I have reiterated over the past few classes as well, because the debates are very huge. They are very deeply philosophical. So when the clone says, it felt right, that I should donate my organs. It felt right. Isn't that what we are supposed to do? Now the question is, are we, as in humans, are we entitled to create creatures who think and feel like that? Are we ethically and morally supposed to create beings whose ardent desire is to be servants to the human race? Is that appropriate? Is that correct? Or is there something vaguely and implicitly disquieting in this assumption that we can actually do this? This is Ishigeru's set of questions. Next, if you think in terms of, I'm not quite sure you can call it a sequel, but it's more or less on the same lines as Never Let Me Go, Ishigeru's next novel, Clara and the Sun. Clara's moral standing as a person is structured around one theme: care. Her job is to be a companion to Josie, because Josie has been ill for a very long time, and she, Clara, will be a companion to this girl until, of course, Josie goes off to college, after which Clara is made redundant, and she winds up in a warehouse where she will live out the rest of her life, by which she means her battery life, and eventually die. Although we are not quite sure robots can be defined and described in the same way as human life and death. But Clara is a humanoid robot, and Clara resembles a human being. Clara performs in a human-like manner. Clara does all those things which the human body is capable of doing. She even tries to please the family members. She is able to understand the emotional undercurrents in family relationships, and she adapts to them. It is what you can think of as an artificial intelligence learning on the job, right? That the artificial intelligence creature, if you want to call it that, is able to learn from the environment. Clara, for example, understands that when the mother and daughter, Josie and her mother, are talking, she should not interrupt. So she goes into a corner of the room and stands facing away from them to give them privacy. Now, how does Clara understand this? Is she programmed to? But you couldn't have been able to program every single aspect of the family dynamics, which means Clara learned. Clara learned to adapt, to understand the family dynamics, and fitted herself into that particular ecosystem, if you want to call it that. So the point is, Clara learns like we do. We have things called emotional intelligence, where we do not make certain kind of jokes, we do not laugh at certain kinds of people, because it would not be appropriate, it would hurt others. It's emotional intelligence. We learn, right? It's a very reductive definition, but we'll do for now. So Clara learns, which means Clara understands, which means also Clara adapts. Now, if she's doing all this, what stops us from thinking of her as a creature akin to humans? She even gives up her body fluid to save Josie. There is one large, Josie has a particular kind of illness, and Clara believes that if she destroys a particular large earth-moving machine, Josie will be saved. So Clara cuts open herself and takes out her very key body fluid to destroy the machine. She believes it will save the girl. But that's not quite going to work, right? We understand that. And Clara's robo-subjectivity is actually built through this connection with humans. And Ishiguro constantly draws attention to the fact that Clara learns with her and through her, mediated by her interactions with the humans. So Clara acquires more and more human qualities. She understands altruism, she understands compassion, she understands doing things for people. So Ishiguro implies her empathy, her altruism, her attitudes in general emerge from the relationships within a particular ecosystem. That they emerge from the socius. Right? Clara exhibits empathy, curiosity, altruism, care and compassion. Now, do you think this set of qualities define her as a human person? These are qualities supposedly associated with humans, right? But here is an artificial being who gives us the same things, who offers us the same attitudes. So would that not be akin to humans? Wouldn't that be like us? Please note, I'm not saying they are us. I'm saying they are like us. So when Clara exhibits all these qualities, why do we think Clara is not like a person? The questions Ishiguro raises here are robots property? Or are they sentient beings entitled to rights? Is robo-servitude ethically, morally acceptable? Then, a bigger political question. Are such robo-carers replacing migrant labor, immigrants, and thereby transforming the social order? As you might know, if you pay attention to global news items, in several countries in the first world, certain professions are almost entirely run by immigrants. And I'm not speaking only of software and the tech giants in the global north. I am thinking here in terms of nursing, medicine, and fields like that, where the largest demographics, the largest population comes from Asia, comes from Asian migrants. So the question is, if the hospitals start replacing immigrants with these robots, what happens to the social order? What happens to the status of the migrants? Are we putting them on par with each other? Are we saying then the humanoid robot deserves the same attention and dignity as the human migrant? Then a much more complicated question, which also has been raised by people. Is it better or worse to have robo-carers? We don't have an answer to that. If Clara has undertaken to take care of humans and has fulfilled these requirements in exact analogy to what humans do, then Clara is deserving of human rights and privileges, right? Ishiguro shows how humans fail to grant a moral status to Clara. How we accept them as labor, but we don't give them the dignity of labor. We accept Clara as somebody who works almost exactly like humans, but we don't give her the rights and the status and the dignity of humans. It's a very common issue, like I said. And the question which we have repeated several times in the last few lessons is, if the robot undertakes all the functions of a human being, like caring for others, if it exhibits the same sentience, care, compassion, altruism as humans, then on what grounds are we saying this is not deserving of, as if this, by this I mean the creature, is not deserving of the status of a moral person? The incident in the interaction where there are ruffianly schoolboys that try to misbehave with Clara and all that is also a point that Ishiguro makes. And the point Ishiguro makes is this, that those humans who ill-treat animals will at some point ill-treat other humans. And those who ill-treat other humans will, of course, ill-treat the artificial being. Alright? So, the assumption is we treat them as less than us. They are not on the same plane. In Ishiguro's novel, when Clara is brought into this household, like I said, she's meant to be a companion to the daughter, she becomes a kind of glue. She brings the household together. So, Clara's insertion into the domestic identity of the house, into the domestic structure and process or processes of the house, means that she is like any human being in that family, within that family structure. So, if we have created Clara to do this, why are we not giving her the status as a family member? Ishiguro highlights two ethical problems. If we concede it is ethical to create beings like Clara, and if Clara has a set of capabilities and capacities, then should we not allow her to fulfill the same aspirations, capabilities, dreams as we grant to the human being? If we assume that Clara has to fulfill her ambitions of serving and serving humans better, then how can we deny that? Of course, the question remains, should we create those? And I'm reiterating here that quote from Steven Peterson, which I have put up before, that if the creature has been created with servile desires and aspirations, then it's not a violation of their aspirations, because that's what they're designed to do. It's not slavery because they will themselves, they're happy to concede their rights to the humans because it's within their programmed ideas and ideals. So there's no question of them being slaves, because unlike slaves who were made to work, who were forced to work against their will, the robot does not work against her or his will. It works based on what it is designed to do. So the question Ishiguro asks is, so how can we deny them that? And that's why Steven Peterson's point is very interesting. In all the programming that has gone into her, she's responsible for her prior actions. Her primary social functions of care remain unchanged, which means Clara's capabilities, her desires, her wants are meant to care for humans. Even at the end of the novel, when she goes into what's called slow fade, she is like a human being. Human beings, when they age, go into a slow fade, right? Sans eyes, sans teeth, sans everything, as the Bard famously said in the 7 Ages of Man. And Clara is like that. She goes into a slow fade. She will no longer, after a point in time, be able to sustain her energy because her battery will run down, her electrical circuits will collapse. So she's gone through the same process. And she has aspirations and desires and capabilities. She has served the human as she was designed to do. She served humans as she desired to do. She was a companion, she was a carer. So on what grounds are we saying Clara doesn't deserve dignity and rights? The point here is, if the artificial being is produced by humans to mimic human feelings, to cater to human needs, to serve as versions of us, as in mirrors to us, then as Clara Anderson clearly demonstrates, you cannot see them as just artificial beings. Perhaps we need to see them as allo-human persons, as Alexandra Alcaraz argues in her interesting book, Are Cyborgs Persons? This, as you can imagine, is what you can call futuristic ethics. This is the ethics of the future. And what we have discovered here in our reading of Ishiguro's 2 novels, Never Let Me Go and Clara and the Sun, the making of robos, the construction, creation of robo-carers is a huge ethical, philosophical conundrum. Are we supposed to design creatures who want to serve us? If you create such creatures, then is it appropriate to say they should not serve us because that's their aspirations? If they do all the things analogous to human beings, then on what grounds do we deny them human rights? Futuristic ethics, as we have seen here, is built on the fact that just as humans are vulnerable, post-human beings are also vulnerable. They might be vulnerable in different and distinct ways, but they are still vulnerable. Thank you.